The Galactic Council chamber was in chaos. Hundreds of alien representatives, from amorphous cloud-like entities to towering crystalline beings, filled the air with frantic voices. A deep, ominous hum reverberated through the enormous crystalline dome, not from an external force, but from the sheer, collective panic of 362 species trying and failing to comprehend the impossible. High Chancellor Vorex, a being of shifting silver tendrils, slammed his articulated limbs onto the levitating podium. His normally fluid, graceful form pulsed erratically with jagged flickers of red, an unmistakable sign of distress. "Order!" His voice, normally as smooth as liquid mercury, cracked under pressure. "This emergency session of the Galactic Council will now commence." Silence did not follow. Instead, a cacophony of voices erupted once more. "They refuse to answer," screeched Ambassador Veltar of the Zenith hive mind, her bioelectric appendages sparking wildly. "We have sent over 53 diplomatic envoys. Each met with silence or worse." "They returned our peace delegation with a fruit basket," growled an armored reptilian warlord. "A fruit basket, labeled thanks. But we're good." "They're challenging us," howled another, their translucent wings quivering. "They have no fear of us." "Fear?" A new voice entered the fray, cool and analytical. Strategic Intelligence Director Zephos, an entity composed of living plasma, hovered forward. His energy signature flickered a deep, worried blue. "No, my dear colleagues, if they feared us, this would be far simpler. The problem is far worse." Vorex stiffened. "Worse? Explain." The chamber's central holo display ignited, filling the room with a dozen fragments of intercepted transmissions from human space. The delegates leaned in as the clips played. A sleek warship hovered over Earth, its diplomatic transmission beaming down to the planet's surface. A moment later, a simple message was received in return. "New phone. Who dis?" An entire council armada stationed at the edge of Sol system was met not with surrender or hostility, but with a livestream. Millions of humans tuned in to watch their fleet approach while betting on what would happen next. A peace offering of quantum crystal artifacts, priceless relics from an empire 1,000,000 years old, was politely declined in favor of a holographic coupon to an Earth-based coffee chain. Vorex's tendrils froze. "This has to be a translation error." "I wish it were," Zephos murmured grimly. "But that is not the worst part." The holo display shifted again. A human video file began to play. The council watched in stunned horror as the screen displayed a highlight reel of humanity's wars, their innovations, and their unrelenting pursuit of progress. The Mars colonies, the orbital dreadnought project. But then the footage shifted. It showed entertainment, fiction, human imagination. "This is their mistake," Zephos said, his plasma form dimming to an uneasy gray. "They do not see war as horror. They see it as a puzzle to be solved, as an inspiration. And they have been testing us." A silence settled over the council. Then, the holo display flickered one last time. A fresh transmission from Earth had arrived. A single file, titled simply, "Songs to Ignore Galactic Diplomacy by," and attached is a link to a playlist. At that moment, High Chancellor Vorex knew the truth. The greatest, most powerful interstellar empire in history had made a miscalculation. Vorex felt something he had not experienced in millennia: helplessness. The council chamber was suffocating with unease. The highest minds of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy sat in stunned silence, watching as their grand diplomatic efforts were reduced to memes and joke playlists. And yet, never before had they encountered a species that simply did not care. Ambassador Zephos, his plasma form flickering erratically, broke the silence. "We must act immediately. If they do not fear us, if they do not respect us, then we must make them understand their place." A murmur rippled through the assembly. For all their posturing, none of them truly understood how dangerous humanity was. Their technology was erratic and decentralized, yet somehow always one step ahead. Their culture was chaotic, yet they thrived in the anarchy they created. And worst of all, they were unpredictable. "Are you suggesting military action?" Vorex's voice, normally unwavering, carried a hint of uncertainty. Zephos hesitated, then adjusted. "Not yet. But we must make a show of force. Blockade their system. Isolate them. If they do not need us, let us see how long they last without the resources of the stars." Then slow, reluctant nods from the chamber. Vorex sighed. feeling the weight of the decision settle onto his shoulders. Then it is decided. The blockade begins immediately. Across the vast emptiness of space, at the edge of Sol system, the first galactic blockade fleet materialized in perfect military precision. From the frozen expanse of Neptune's orbit to the asteroid belts beyond Mars, a fleet of over 10,000 warships established an unbreakable perimeter. Massive capital ships hovered in silent danger. Their message was clear. No ship enters. No ship leaves. Humanity is alone now. On the bridge of the TSS Aegis, the flagship of Earth's military fleet, Commander David Evans watched the unfolding situation with a raised eyebrow. The young officer leaned back in his chair, fingers idly tapping against the armrest as the sensor data poured in. The sheer arrogance of the Galactic Council was almost adorable. "Well," he muttered, glancing over at Evelyn Eve Reyes, the lead strategist and scientific genius responsible for most of Earth's counterintelligence operations. "Looks like they've finally lost their patience." Eve exhaled through her nose, amused. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear as she studied the incoming fleet data. 10,000 ships. Her voice carried no fear, just mild annoyance. David chuckled, stretching his arms. "What's the game plan?" Eve rolled her eyes. "Please, we've been expecting this for months." With a flick of her fingers, the massive holographic display in front of them shifted, revealing encrypted transmissions, deep space scans, and predictive models that had anticipated the Council's every move. The blockade? Expected. The trade restrictions? Already bypassed. Countered 2 months ago when Earth introduced a new interstellar market through third-party traders. David whistled lowly. "You really don't give them a chance, do you?" Eve smirked. "It's not my fault they still think we play by their rules." A new ping appeared on the screen. David's smirk widened. Oh, this is going to be good. On the bridge of the Zentari war cruiser, Kalzik, Fleet Commander Razkel watched in growing frustration as an unauthorized transmission bypassed their communications jammers. The moment they decrypted it, their screens were flooded with advertisements. Razkel felt his frills stiffen. He barely had time to recover before another notification popped up. This time, it was a live stream. The screen lit up, displaying a human talk show, one of their strange, primitive entertainment programs. The host, a casually dressed man with an easy grin, greeted the entire Galactic Council fleet as if they were old friends. The screen shifted to live footage of human freighters casually slipping past the blockade, their hulls covered in stealth plating and false identification transponders. The chat accompanying the live stream was exploding with messages from millions of humans and even a few aliens, all watching the blockade fail in real time. The realization hit Razkel like a shockwave. David leaned forward, watching the chaos unfold with a wide grin. "You know, I was almost hoping they'd be more creative." Eve snorted, shaking her head. "They don't know how to handle us. They expect submission or defiance, not this." David's expression sobered slightly. "How long before they realize brute force isn't gonna work?" Eve hesitated. "Not long." Her fingers danced over the console, pulling up intercepted classified council transmissions. David's smirk faded. "What?" She turned to him, her voice deadly serious. "They're considering a preemptive fight." For the first time that day, the humor drained from the room. "They're scared," she continued, her eyes dark. "And scared people do unknown things." A heavy silence stretched between them. Then David stood, rolling his shoulders. "Well," he said lightly, though the steel in his voice was unmistakable. "Guess it's time we stop playing games." Eve nodded, already pulling up Earth's contingency plans. "Time to show them why they should have left us alone." As the stars outside the viewport shimmered, the fight drums of humanity began to beat. David Evans stood on the bridge of the TSS Aegis, watching the stars through the reinforced viewport. The blockade was still in place, but it was crumbling. It had started as a calculated show of force, a warning from the Galactic Council, but in just a matter of days, it had become something else entirely, a thing for the entire galaxy to witness. But Eve's words still rang in his ears. The weight of that reality settled over him like cold iron. The Council was powerful and ancient. They had conquered countless civilizations before humanity even took its first steps into the void. If they truly believed Earth was a danger, they wouldn't just sit back and watch their blockade fail. They would act. A sharp beep echoed across the command deck. Eve's voice cut through the low hum of the ship's systems. "We've intercepted a high-priority transmission. It's encrypted, but I cracked it. You're going to want to see this. David turned, his easy grin replaced by a look of grim focus. Show me. The massive hollow screen flickered to life, displaying a classified council transmission. Vorex himself stood at the center of a war chamber, surrounded by holograms of fleet commanders, strategic intelligence officers, and planetary governors. His form shimmered erratically, an indication of extreme emotional distress. The blockade has failed. His voice was taut with frustration. Every conventional measure we have taken has been countered, mocked, or outright ignored. Humans do not respond to force the way other species do. They are not deterred by isolation. They thrive in it. An uneasy murmur rippled through the assembled officers. One of them, a towering reptilian admiral, stepped forward. Then we escalate. A swift, coordinated strike on their homeworld. We neutralize their leadership, their military infrastructure before they can retaliate. No, Vorex cut him off sharply. We do not have that luxury. The humans are already several steps ahead of us. They've been watching, studying. They knew this blockade would come before we even considered it. A flicker of motion. Another screen lit up, displaying Earth's military intelligence reports, obtained from the Council's own systems. It wasn't just that humanity had been prepared. They had anticipated every single move. This is no ordinary species, Vorex admitted, his voice low. They are not like the civilizations we have conquered before. They do not fight for survival. They fight because it is their nature to overcome. We have spent centuries perfecting the art of war, and yet they are better at it. Then another voice, cold and calculating, a synthetic being, likely from the Silicon Consensus, their mechanical overlords. Then there is only one solution. The screen shifted again, revealing a set of coordinates not over Earth, but over Mars. A red circle marked the largest human shipyard hidden beneath Olympus Mons, the primary construction site of their next-generation warships. The synthetic voice continued, We cripple them where it will hurt the most, their ability to expand. Eve inhaled sharply beside David. They're going to act on the Mars colonies. For the first time in years, David felt his pulse spike with genuine fury. It was one thing to posture, to flex military strength, to play games of strategy. He clenched his fists, jaw tightening. How soon? Eve's fingers flew across the holographic console. Based on their fleet movements, less than 24 hours. The bridge fell into a tense, charged silence. Then David exhaled slowly, forcing his anger into something sharper, more controlled. All right, he said, voice steady but firm. We don't have time to warn the Council that this is a mistake. And even if we did, they wouldn't listen. That means we handle it ourselves. Eve arched a brow. You're suggesting we take on an entire invasion fleet? David turned, his grin returning, not the easy, casual smirk of before, but something colder. I'm saying we make this the last mistake they ever make. The Galactic Council's attack fleet had already begun its approach. Sleek war cruisers, bristling with energy cannons, descended toward Olympus Mons like the outstretched talons of a predator. On the surface, the Martian defense platforms scrambled to react, but they weren't built to repel a full fight. David didn't wait and didn't hesitate. He ordered, Bring us in fast. Eve, get the drones online. I want every ECM unit deployed. Scramble their targeting systems. Eve's fingers danced over the controls. On it. They'll be flying blind in 3, 2, 1. The first wave of enemy fire streaked toward the surface, only to vanish in a flicker of distortion. The Council's weapons couldn't lock onto their targets. Their systems were being jammed in real time by a storm of micro-drones, each one broadcasting hundreds of false signals. Confusion rippled through the enemy fleet. Their perfect formation wavered. The Aegis weaved between the massive warships with inhuman precision. Explosions bloomed. A panicked transmission flared across enemy channels. They're not fighting like a civilization under siege. No, Vorex's voice came through, filled with dawning horror. They're fighting like predators. One by one, the Council ships broke formation. They had come expecting submission or desperation. Instead, they had met something else entirely. The Aegis dove through the chaos, severing supply lines, disrupting command relays, and turning the Council's precision tactics into utter chaos. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Mars was still standing. David exhaled, running a hand through his hair as the adrenaline faded. Around him, the bridge crew erupted into cheers and whoops of victory. Eve leaned back, arms crossed. smirking. Well, that was fun. David smirked back. Yeah, let's hope they learned their lesson. But even as he spoke the words, something told him this wasn't over. Now, they would see them for what they truly were. The Galactic Council was in turmoil. The Council convened in an emergency session. The chamber, once a place of regal authority, now felt small and suffocating under the weight of uncertainty. Vorex stood at the head of the assembly, his normally fluid form stiff with contained rage. The humans have defied us. His voice reverberated across the chamber. A murmur rippled through the room. Some species, like the towering warlords of the Zifar Dominion, nodded in agreement. Others remained silent. We have but one choice left, Vorex continued. We must act. A shrill alarm cut him off. The council members turned as a live feed materialized in the center of the chamber. A ship was approaching a single human envoy vessel. The council chamber fell silent. Vorex's form flickered with unease. No species, none, had ever dared to enter the council's domain uninvited. This was sacred ground, the beating heart of interstellar governance. And now, humanity had sent someone here. The vessel docked, its doors sliding open with a hiss of depressurization. Footsteps echoed down the pristine, crystalline hallways. The council chamber doors burst open. And then, a single human walked in. David Evans. He wasn't wearing ceremonial robes. He wasn't wearing armor. He wasn't flanked by guards or adorned with symbols of human power. He wore a simple flight jacket, his posture relaxed, his hands in his pockets. His expression was unreadable, save for the ghost of a smirk playing at the edge of his lips. Vorex's tendrils tightened in fury. How dare you? David held up a single finger, and Vorex stopped talking. The entire council chamber froze. David took his time. His eyes scanned the room, flicking over the hundreds of alien faces staring back at him, some furious, some apprehensive, and some intrigued. So, he said finally, his voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber. That was cute. The council bristled. You call our military action cute? One of the warlords growled. David shrugged. What else would you call a bunch of space bureaucrats throwing a tantrum because we didn't RSVP to their little galactic dinner party? Vorex's form flared with barely contained rage. You challenge us, he hissed. You stand here, alone, in the heart of our empire, and you mock us? David's smirk widened. I didn't come here alone. The chamber went still, and then, one by one, holographic projections flickered to life. Each one showed a different location across the council's domain. Each one showed a different human fleet. See? That's the thing, David continued. Still casual, still calm. While you were all busy ranting about how to deal with us, we were already inside your borders, already among your people, already an unstoppable part of your systems. Impossible, someone shrieked. They don't have the reach, another wailed. They were supposed to be isolated. David tilted his head. Yeah, about that. Turns out your little blockade, it actually made things easier for us, forced us to innovate, forced us to find new ways around your systems. And now? He gestured to the flickering holograms. Now we don't need your trade networks. The horror on their faces was delicious. We don't need your governance. A warlord staggered back. And we sure as hell don't need your permission. David pulled out a small data chip, tossing it lazily onto the central podium. That's a gift, he said. From us to you. Vorex's tendrils hesitated before reaching for it. He inserted the chip into the chamber's mainframe. The screen flickered. And then, the council watched as their own classified transmissions, their plans, attempts to control humanity, their every deception were broadcasted, in real time, to the entire galaxy. David said, grinning. Guess your little secret's out. The chamber descended into chaos. Some species demanded explanations, but many watched humanity with something new in their eyes. David turned, walking back toward the doors. Oh, he called over his shoulder. And one last thing, he continued. From now on, we decide how this relationship works, not you. And with that, he left, leaving the greatest power in the galaxy to crumble under its own weight. The silence in the Galactic Council chamber was deafening. Vorex stood frozen, his tendrils twitching erratically. Around him, representatives from 100 species shouted over one another, their voices clashing in a symphony of chaos and desperation. A few, the smartest ones, simply sat in stunned silence, realizing the truth before anyone dared to say it aloud. The Galactic Council had already lost. Humanity hadn't come to bow. They hadn't come to beg, or to bargain. They had come to tell the Council that their rule was over. And David Evans had done it with a smirk and a data chip. Beyond the chamber, across the vast networks of the galactic civilizations, the broadcast continued to play. Every empire, every trading hub, every colony, they had all seen the truth. The Council, the almighty force that had ruled the stars for millennia, failed. They had tried to subjugate humanity, and instead, they had handed them the greatest diplomatic victory in interstellar history. In the depths of the chamber, Ambassador Veltar of the Zenith hive mind spoke first. Her bioelectric filaments flickered uncertainly, her usually synchronized thought patterns disrupted by something new: indecision. This changes everything. Beside her, Fleet Commander Razkel of the Zifar Dominion clenched his claws. The warrior race had always prided themselves on strength, on the ability to crush their enemies. But today, they had seen something far more terrifying than brute force. They fought without raising a single army, Razkel muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. They won without acting a single. For a species that had built its empire on warfare, that was an impossible reality to accept. Vorex turned sharply, his silver form spiking in anger. No, he hissed. This does not end here. We are still the Council. We have ruled these stars since before their ancestors even crawled from their oceans. The chamber doors slammed open. Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway was Eve Reyes. She wasn't alone. Behind her stood representatives from over a dozen species. Leaders, diplomats, military officials, but not of the Council. These were the outliers. The challengers. The voices that had long been silenced by bureaucracy and fear. Eve took a slow step forward, her sharp eyes locking onto Vorex's. You don't get it, do you? She said, voice sharpened. Vorex recoiled. He could hear it, the finality in her tone. The moment you tried to control us, the moment you decided you could dictate our future, you sealed your own fate. She gestured to the holographic feed still flickering above them. You thought you were in charge. But guess what? Her lips curled into a dangerous, delighted smile. Nobody's listening to you anymore. Vorex turned back to the chamber, expecting resistance, expecting anger, but instead, he saw uncertainty, hesitation. The once unshakable leaders of the most powerful empire in the galaxy no longer believed in their own rule. Somewhere in the chamber, a hushed murmur began to ripple outward, soft at first, then louder. A representative from the Orion Syndicate stood. I see no reason to remain under the rule of a council that acts in fear. A bioluminescent leader of the Helios Confederation followed. The humans have shown more strength and restraint than the council has in all its years of conquest. One by one, voices rose in agreement. Some were hesitant, others were bold, but the tide had turned. And then, David Evans laughed lightly, like he was watching a predictable ending unfold exactly as planned. You know, we never wanted to run the place, he said, crossing his arms. We're kind of busy back home, but someone's got to clean up this mess. Vorex felt the weight of the moment crushes down on him. The council was finished, and humanity had just rewritten the stars. A week later, in orbit above Earth, the first meeting of the new Galactic Accord was held. The council was gone. In its place was something different, a coalition, not of rulers, but of equals. No longer a monolithic power dictating laws from above, but a forum of independent civilizations, each with a voice, each with a choice. And at the head of it all, not as rulers, but as architects of this new era, stood humanity. Eve watched from the glass-paneled bridge of the TSS Aegis, sipping a coffee as David walked up beside her. Think they'll actually make this work? He asked, nodding toward the fleets gathered outside. Eve exhaled, smiling softly. Maybe, maybe not. But at least now, they have a chance. David hummed in amusement. And if they screw it up? Eve smirked. Then we'll teach them how to do it right. And this time, it would be on humanity's terms.